question number 2, how's hiring going? When's that new team coming online? Why is headcount not growing? Or in this case, why is the organization structured this way? Or some version of that question. So I guess Eli, like when you hear that question, I guess what's your initial reaction to that? Andrew, what's underlying? What actually is the intent behind that question?
I'll say that one to me is less fraught because it's less coded. Like if I am behind on hiring, if I said I was going to have a team and there's not a team, that's pretty
Mm.
that's pretty black and white. Engineering is often one of the bigger and more expensive functions. The budgeting around it and the planning, the people and stuff is a pretty important part of the business. And so, if you're not making a plan or you're not doing the plan that you made or something, it's kind of as an obvious place for problems. But to me, from a translation standpoint, I'll just say that one is a little bit more of a, if the question is why isn't that team there, that's kind of is the question, is why isn't that team there?
Again, I think we're going through these questions because this is probably like, let's assume, a CEO that's not like trying hard to be thoughtful about it, but like that could actually, I would argue that could mean a couple things. It could mean that, like, I'll play the CEO for a second. Like, hey, I fought hard to create this budget. Like, why the F isn't it hired yet? Like, that's the literal interpretation of that. The other possibility, though, is it could be a coded thing, which is like, I still want something done and it's not done. Like, so Eli, you may have convinced me that the team is tapped out. Good job, right? Like, I've bought into your system, right? Like, and then thus the only way that I can get more is to hire more people. And so my question of that stuff could be one of actually like a indirect way of actually like still complaining that my future or the thing I want done is not done. And I've somehow internalized that I can't get it till you get the hiring done. So we've like congratulations, you convinced me that logical step has to happen. The downside is now I'm applying pressure to this new logical step. And then I'll just Patrick, I'll say this for all of us, like, headcounts are complicated, right? Like when you clear budget for this stuff, you get it done as fast as possible because you never know how the world shakes. And all of a sudden you don't have those headcounts anymore on those things. So get them done while you can is part of it. But I think there is sometimes that other thing, which is like you said, like, hey, we're going to build this new, adapter or version of this thing. When we get this team, like, someone might have fully got that in their head. Like, I can't do that thing till I get that team. And so now I'm going to sit on you to actually get that, that team done. When in actuality, the real answer is I want that thing done, right? Like, it could be that too.
So this one's curious because how do you get ahead of this then? Or how would you address this?
Hire as fast as you damn well can.
Man, if only it were that easy. I have thousands of people in the back of my head saying it is so hard to hire right now. Like, how do you do this fast?
Yeah, I mean, I know Eli thinks this is innate, but like, I joked earlier that the head of engineering is actually about like translating. Well, maybe the other job, the co-job, or maybe the higher part of the job is you're in charge of hiring. Period. That's all you do, right? Like it's like 75-90% of your time is just hiring. And I think people that don't realize that, they're in trouble, right? Especially in this day and age, to your point, Patrick, around how hard it is to hire on that part. But they don't think that's their job and they ain't getting it done, right?
Yeah, that's what I will say is hiring is hard in that it takes concerted effort and attention and it takes it takes work and it takes time and it takes energy. It's not hard in the sense of if you apply lots of energy and it isn't happening, I claim there's a problem. Like it's not that hard that it's literally impossible to find people.
Patrick, you asked earlier around Eli and I's history in this, and I actually think this is one area that we really derive value from actually having worked together on that in the past, which is I think we take it as innate that that it's important to do this, right? And I trust and I find a shared sensibility with Eli about this one, which is like hiring is all consuming when you're at it, right? And like, I think he and I had been in the trenches together over a decade ago, that when it's go time, you on hiring, you are all in on hiring. I take it as a given that Eli gets me on that part of it, and I think he acts that way. So like that's a benefit I think we get from history on that part of it.
So in this question about hiring, Andrew, the follow-up is like, what does the CEO need to know to like, I guess, get past the immediate question?
I think this is a good reminder around like it's not just like it's getting done, I'm working on it, show your work, right? If we're at the point of actually doing this, so like this actually applies how to get ahead of it and actually showing your work on this stuff, which is like, it depends on the company. Sometimes this falls under, talent or HR or all these things, but like people side. But either way, like, don't just say I'm working on it. It's just like, hey, like, how many people are actually happening here? Like, how many candidates do you have in the funnel? Like, what are we actually like? What's the forecast of getting these things done? Like, how much time is being consumed by interviewing? Like, just to, there's a bunch of stats that could substantiate that this is actually happening and you're tracking towards doing it, right? So this is like, around like how many candidates are late stage, like how many are in the funnel, like, where's your time actually going on this stuff? Like how many interviews are going on? Like what's in some ways hiring is like a sales funnel and that stuff, and you can actually show it and forecast it. And I think what's the pipeline look like analogously? But I think that's one where I don't think it's sufficient to say it's done. It's done. Like, or I'm working on it. You actually have to show your work on this stuff because, and the part is, if you really are doing it, it's not. It shouldn't be hard to pull that together. You are, right. I was gonna say earlier to your question around like, or back to my earlier comment around like, what else? Like, could this mean? It could also mean that like, the said CEO or the business is really waiting for a feature. I still stand by job of this translator is to like, to actually get out there and understand what is the business waiting for. So like to get ahead of it, like don't let it be in this weird dependency graph of like, okay, they're asking about hiring, so it means that like we need to actually get the adapter for blah blah done on this stuff. You should know that the rest of the company is sitting on pins and needles waiting for X and Y to be done, and they're getting rip shit about like why that isn't done, right? Like that's part of, like the job is to suss out like what are we actually waiting on here and that stuff.
I just wanted to add I think if you're ever in a situation to that point where you've set expectations that this new team, it's the creation of a new team or new people are the answer to getting the time sensitive thing done, you're setting yourself up for heartache, because hiring people is hard. The time sensitivity is hard, and there's always ramp time and a J curve of negative productivity when people start, because they gotta learn everything first. And so while I think it can be easy to
whoever did that just kicked the can down the road, that may have actually made the can like scarier on the other side of this
right.
thing, right? Like
Right.
I loved the show your work metaphor. It reminds me of like doing geometry proofs, like in high school math class. And like most of the score, like the points on your test come from the actual showing of the work than actually getting the right answer. So, just to draw a little.
Eli, so please from now on when we do our meetings, just end it with a QED. Like that would be like
That's great. And I also think about the imagery of the sitting on pins and needles, like what the business like waiting desperately for something to finish, having like working with our engineering team, like usually there'll be like a new feature or something that we're working on. Like some of the emails and marketing things that we were going to send out to our community couldn't go out or go in development until that feature was finished. And so I have sat on this chair desperately at the screen waiting for when this thing will happen.
See, Patrick, you're that guy. So like you should actually like you should practice some of these questions and like fire them across the transom.